Welcome back. We are in Amplify track 1 with KadenceWP here. And I hope you guys have been getting a ton of value out of all of the sessions we have had today. We have another amazing presentation on deck with Timothy Wood. So let me introduce Timothy to you really quickly. I've got a short intro for you. So Timothy loves product engineering as a developer of people and a maker of things. He has built a career pursuing functional design, open source, and connecting people through democratized technology. So help me welcome Timothy Wood. Hello.
Hello, friends.
How are you?
Life is good. Life is good. It's been an awesome day,
Great.
though.
Yeah, it has. I know you had just asked our previous presenter a question and he answered it beautifully. So thanks for being engaged this whole time as well as presenting and sharing your amazing ideas. You're going to be teaching us how to use Kadence WP with Gravity Forms to build apps. So I'm really excited to see what you're going to teach us. So I'm going to bring your presentation on the screen here. I'm going to remove myself and I will let you take it away. Just before I do that, though, as a reminder, if you would like to ask Timothy any questions, please go ahead and pop those in the chat on YouTube as they come up. And at the very end, we'll save all those questions for Q&A. So be sure to ask away if you want to get direct feedback. All right, without further ado, I'm going to hide myself and take it away.
Awesome. This is super exciting. Just to kind of start off, it's been a fantastic day, and I'm really fortunate to be a part of the Kadence Amplify conference this week. And I will say it's a bit poetic that the last three in this track have a bit of a vertical challenge with our hair at the moment. But I do have to say David Johnson definitely wins when it comes to well-groomed beards. So along those lines, today is going to be definitely a dig into how to use WordPress as a platform to build and to play off the catchy term of SaaS, but to really build applications for yourself, either as micro apps or for clients, and expand from there. And to give you a little background on me or myself, I've been in the web development community for 20 plus years. I've been specifically involved in WordPress for as long as I can remember, which is a little bit longer. But the growth that I've seen within WordPress as a capable blogging platform to then CMS to then expanded with the plugin architecture into e-commerce and to other areas, I do think it is a extremely capable application. So even though I may throw some shade today at specific pieces of application architecture, such as the limited database structures around posts and meta types and things like that, please know that it comes from deep respect in my own heart from the community at whole and the participation to continue to go to the next level. So with that being said, let's move to the next one. So as much as my ADHD allows me, I do like to be organized, but I will probably hit a few rabbit trails today, and we'll walk through some actual live demos and things like that. But hopefully by the time I wrap up, you will have a good understanding of how to use WordPress beyond just the basic content management system, but to think about it in the sense of how can this be converted to an application that I can use much more holistically or in creative ways that may not necessarily fit the way WordPress is marketed or built. So along those lines, we're going to go through kind of a quick introduction. We're going to define the requirements of a really basic SaaS or an application that we might have and kind of some of those commonality components that we'll leverage. We're going to take a break for some meme jokes and some hilarity, and then start working through what it actually looks like in practice, what these applications look like in the real world. And then we'll go through the final countdown of what does this mean to you as a agency owner, as an individual freelancer, as an individual site owner, or someone who's just curious. Realistically, this specific talk is probably geared more for someone in that medium to a more advanced stage of use of WordPress. So I know I will go through pretty quickly a lot of some pretty advanced concepts, but my contact information is in here. I know Kadence has done a fantastic job of sharing the presentations and things like that. So if you have questions that are not answered during this presentation, please reach out to me directly or reach out to the community, and we'll do the best we can. And then the final piece is I'm hopeful that this will inspire you to build something cool. I've built my career around making and building and developing not just the technical nerd things, but also looking at how this improves people's lives and being able to give back and add tools that will allow you to do the same. So with that, let's jump into kind of the simplified requirement set that we're looking at. Typically, in my perspective, I look at how WordPress as a whole kind of addresses a lot of commonality needs when it comes to content management and user management. So a lot of the kind of out of the box features are pretty good and pretty decent. And so in regards to a SaaS, if you see a lot on YouTube and on social media and other places where folks are saying, here, buy my starter pack for $200 and you get all these cool features. One of the things that we get with WordPress out of the box is almost a very similar or competitive advantage when it comes to some of those core features. When it comes to your business idea or your specific core features, that's where we want to look more beyond just the strategy and then how do we actually execute on that. So I've broken down, and there's many different ways to address this, but I've broken down SaaS, like a SaaS app in general, really is constituted of 5 main areas. One is your idea. What is the idea of you or that your client has as far as being able to get data, do something with the data, process the data, and then do something, and then provide value back into their client or marketplace. So those core features listed here are not necessarily the core features of WordPress, but it's the core features that you're trying to develop or build from your application. Then most importantly after that is what value are you providing another human or another system? And that is where user management comes into play. So building that path between being able to be paid or to just track users if it's a free application. Just because it's a SaaS doesn't mean you are taking money at the moment. Like we'll deal with some payment processing concepts later in the talk today. But as far as the user management is, how do we get converting of users from being kind of interested prospects into active participants, and that user management platform behind the scenes on that. Third, we have a data architecture, and data architecture is really thinking about what I like to refer to as data portability. Ultimately, in my mind, if you're doing application development correctly, you're going to iterate through things. Just because your first idea isn't what ends up actually launching doesn't mean that that's not a success. If anything, you're going to go through many different iterations of that idea to finally get to your launch. And once you're launched, it doesn't stop there. It continues to iterate over time. And that's where WordPress as a platform really can help. We see that iterative process over the countless years of patches and releases and new features and functionality. Earlier in the conference, we were seeing some awesome use of the Kadence block editor and the block tools that take the WordPress blocks and just expand on them even greater. Similar in that same case is that if we can spend a little time up front kind of planning that way your data is going to interact with itself, interact with your users, interact with your application, and essentially taking your strategy of your core features and bringing that down into more of a tactical delivery, it's going to be a much more easy to iterate process. And there may be things where you end up having to tweak and refine those over time, but getting that platform built out or planned out initially, even before you click install and let's begin, is going to give you a really good runway for the development of your future ideas. Number 4 is your integrations. Realistically, none of us are a silo. We do not operate as an island unto ourselves. And so the idea behind the integrations is you're going to have integrations with or tied to other vendors. We saw some GTM integrations earlier today as far as tracking analytics and management of front-end code and things like that. We've seen some integrations with like the backup processes and secure backup. We've also seen integrations with payment processors and other aspects of an application where you take your core feature, you ingest data potentially through an integration, you modify that data potentially through an integration, and then you push that data back out to your user base potentially through an integration. And so think about how those ways to tie into those third-party services or appliances to allow for that data flow so you're part of the ecosystem at large. And then finally, monitor and scale. And that is really about understanding how to see what's going on with your application, seeing how your application is being used, both at the user level, but also at the technical level, beyond just looking at your server platform and saying, do I have enough server space? Do I have enough CPU power? Am I getting billed too much? Am I getting billed too less? Like understanding how to monitor your application health, understand how to monitor your user behaviors. That can also even be through integrations. I know we saw a presentation on Google Analytics and the integration through GTM and Facebook pixel tracking. Those kinds of front end conversions or front end observations are crucial for understanding how your users are using your application, because the way you may have expected may not actually be on the execution. So breaking that down and seeing your idea, as rough as it may be, then understanding how to work through each of these steps is really kind of the foundation and starting point for your application. So where do we start? The reality is you have to start with WordPress. Now, you can build any kind of application with any tech stack. I prefer to use WordPress. My agency called Always Curious, we primarily focus on WordPress applications and clients that are focused in that arena. And as of the last year plus, we have only done Kadence. So I will sell my support towards the Kadence platform and the theme and plugin suite. You can definitely do a lot with the free theme and plugins for block editing. But my experience has been if you go into the more premium section, the capabilities just tend to really expand. And then to build on that, we start with that building block of Kadence and of the theme and the blocks management. Then personally, I prefer to use advanced custom fields. I know that's a hot topic at the moment. I'll let you all come to your own conclusions on where you need to stand with using MetaBox or Croco or Voxel or Pods or SCF or whatever you decide to use. The reality is that picking a tool that allows you to handle that data architecture in the form of making things more WordPressy. It's a new technical term we're going to coin, which is driving the construction or the definitions around your post types, around your meta fields, around your taxonomies, and the relationships of your data across those systems. And with the three that I've mentioned already, with WordPress and Kadence and ACF, the beautiful part about them is they're all very low to no code implementations to start with. And then you start to expand from there. On my slide here, I mentioned code snippets before Gravity Forms. The reality is Gravity Forms and ACF are the core kind of underground blocks that everything that I build, everything that my team builds is based on within the WordPress ecosystem. We personally really like to use code snippets. There's other options out there, WP code block. You can even build this stuff yourself and build your own custom plugin to drop into sites so that you just have kind of this pre-built template. But the reality is code snippets kind of comes before Gravity Forms, in that there will be other pieces that you're going to kind of stage up or set into place so that when Gravity Forms is enabled and you start pulling in some of those additional add-ons, that you can expand on that even further. I'm not going to go into all of these plugins mentioned at the bottom. This is more hopefully meant that you can take a snapshot or grab the link and review at your own time. The demos that I will be showing later will feature actually all of these other plugins, and I'll kind of explain how we use those. So next step on this is I've given you the build blocks. So at this point, you should be able to go and just build your whole application. And at this point, we should be able to take questions. If you're amazing and soaked all that in, rock and roll. It took me years to get here, so I fully understand. We're going to start digging into, like, what does this actually look like? How are we actually going to build these things and put these building blocks together? So today we're going to walk through a couple of different demos. I do have a demo on Kadence Demo WP Nexus. We probably actually won't work through that one today because I ended up breaking it before the presentation. But I can actually show you some cool in production applications, as well as some that are in flight. And then finally, this is kind of a bonus link. If you made it this far, I've got a few goodies to give you as far as the code snippets and some cool features that I'm using today. So the first one we're going to jump into is actually the cynics at alwayscurious.co. And just make sure my screen shares over. There it is. What this is actually a product that we're working on with one of our clients that does financial forecasting in the construction industry. And what you're seeing is literally a site as it's in progress. So we have regular meetings with our client. They give us content, they give us feature and functionality desires. And in their specific case, the user requirement that they have is that they are trying to build a new aspect of their business to provide their customers a way to have an authenticated login to see what their forecasts are and compare that to actually real-time data that's being pulled in from hundreds of thousands of different construction material manufacturers. So, for example, companies that make doors and windows for use in homes or even in commercial installations. More specific in cases of companies that make carpet or hardwood flooring, sheetrock, and all that kind of stuff. And so what we've done is used WordPress. Their main marketing site is WordPress. So this allows for them to have their clients pull in from their main marketing site, come into this area, start seeing what kind of options that they can get. And again, a lot of this is boilerplate that you're seeing, but it should help you inspire or see what you can do for your own application. So what we have is a Kadence theme. We have the new custom headers, which is fantastic. I absolutely love it. In this case here, this is an unauthenticated header. So that way that if you are not logged in, this is what you see. And we'll give you options to start your free trial, to create a new account. If you want to see what our pricing is, we built out pricing tables using the Kadence AI for template generation. And if you want to go see like a specific window or a door, if you're not logged in, we have ways to get you into the pricing. I'm going to demonstrate a quick login, and we'll come back to this login page in just a second. Once the user is logged in, and again, I'm logged in as myself, so that's why I see the gray or the black bar across the top. A general user would actually come to this dashboard, and they would see this kind of display. We're currently waiting on our client to give us some more information to make it more compelling. But we have an active use of our subscriptions. So in my particular case, my account is tied and working with these two product categories of windows and doors. We focus currently on generators, major appliances, and windows and doors because those are the top main areas within the construction industry that heavily rely on pricing and forecasting and along those lines. So in this case, we can go into like manage subscription, and I can add a subscription. So I can select a different or additional properties and add those. We can do coupon codes. We can take pricing information. We can change our names and go from there. And this is all using Gravity Forms. So we're using an additional plugin besides Gravity Forms to do the subscription management through Stripe. But there's other awesome plugins out there that allow for integration with, for example, with authorize.net or through other similar kinds of systems. And I'm just going to reload this back to manage subscription here. Clear my session. Right. Look at that. And we see stuff that's breaking in real time. So that's the awesome part of this. So you can see here under subscription history, these are the management of us doing simple tests to manage or upgrade and downgrade. And this is part of those integrations with Gravity Forms. Gravity Forms Stripe subscription plugin, I believe is what it's called. And it's listed as a link at the end of the presentation. So in here, we're just giving really basic information. And again, we can go and develop this in greater detail. And we'll look into some of how the page building pieces are going. But just to refer back, again, we're using the custom headers that Kadence has. We're using a lot of out-of-the-box kind of tooling that allows us to get this more dynamic interface for our users. Moving to our next demo real quick. We have another client, and this is a national locksmithing agency, and they provide similar to like Angie's List in the US for custom services if you need a handyman around the house or if you need a new plumbing job done or things like that. This particular company does that, but they only focus within the locksmithing industry and for commercial and residential users. And so one of the things that they've built is a platform by which to dispatch locksmiths on custom jobs, or specific jobs that have been requested. And they have about 180 different partnerships with other organizations that provide leads in. So, for example, large enterprise companies like Walmart, each store has their own agent or kind of reference manager, part of usually the store owner, and that person is then uses tools that the corporate office hands them, and one of those is the relationship with the locksmith agency. And so when they need access to the safe, something happens with the key codes, or if there's an issue with their sliding doors or anything like that, instead of them having to go find the local service provider that can help resolve that, they have a portal through the locksmith agents to be able to put a request in, and then that gets filtered out to a authorized, vetted, and certified locksmith that they can pick that work up. So locksmiths can come in, and this is really more of a back-end application for the locksmiths in that space. And this is a tool that then locksmiths can go and they can log in and use this tool and register themselves with their subscription system. And we can have pieces where they can go into, for example, to service requests. And they can see these are the specific service requests that they then have leads that are offered. And they can go and use an accept or decline workflow, and that is all defined through the back end of WordPress. And there's some really awesome plugins out there for handling custom workflows, similar to Zapier, however you say it. And there's some awesome other tools that you can use to build that. In this particular case, for this customer, we used Gravity Forms along with some Gravity Flow integrations to build some workflow and work statuses. And then from there, provide kind of the backbone for this application. And we'll dig more deeply into some of these. This next kind of demo that we're going to walk through is a company called Arena. They're a financial services company, and their big job is to, or their main focus is to provide customers with the ability to, give me just a second, provide customers with the ability to have a fractional CFO on staff without having to pay for a full-time service. And so they have a marketing site, and this is one way that they can kind of market out their services. And then from there, it ties into a back-end system, which is their app.cfo. And so what they do is they work with tax accountants, CPAs, CFOs, and other financial kind of services industry kind of professionals, and they have a system in the back end to where they can then manage their hours, they can manage company reports and meetings, and things along those lines. And we'll dig into kind of how that plays between the SaaS. And in this case, we're actually using WordPress for their marketing site, and then we've stood up a separate WordPress site to run the application for the back end. So the first part that's interesting of the Arena integration is that you'll notice that I just logged in on the back end of the app, and I'm going to refresh the front end site. These are two separate domains on two separate hosting systems on completely different integration providers. And what we have done is we are leveraging tools to session share between those two systems all of your user credentials. So when you sign up as underneath the marketing site, you're able to then automatically have accounts that are then set over into your application and be able to have a single sign-on in both approaches. It was kind of a unique experience in our case. We've done this several other times, but in this one here, we've built some tools that will then allow you to transition. So as a client, when you go and you sign up, it will create you a profile on the SaaS, and then as the system administrator within that SaaS, they can manage those specific tools and kind of the profiles of those users outside of it. So we have a team that is dedicated to the marketing piece, and they worry about our SEO, and they worry about content generation, creating blogs and outreach. And then we have a separate team that handles all of the staff and support for the financial services when it comes to the organizational management, KPIs, assessments, user history, and things like that. So we're going to switch back to our presentation. Go back here. just to go to the list of the applications that, or the plugins that we're using. So on all of these sites, we're using Kadence. On all of these sites, we're using ACF. On all these sites, we're using Gravity Forms in variated levels. We're also using code snippets. And most of the time with my agency, we typically build a custom plugin to drive this. In this particular case, all of these demos, I wanted to build them a little quicker, a little faster, and have less of a version control while we're building them out. So these are more recent deliveries. And so we kind of prototype this stuff out within code snippets. And then from there, we'll let it sit, bake, we'll adjust the code as needed, and then we'll push that into more of a structured version control through GitHub. We're also using plugins like Role Editor and user switching, Advanced Custom Fields Extended Pro, and some database tables with hook turn. Just from a performance standpoint, we do have some pop-ups for modals, and we'll walk through some of that. And then query monitoring, admin columns, stuff like this is all more for the administrative side as a business user. If you are using these tools to see what's the health or the performance of that application. So on every page, we're using Query Monitor. If you notice at the top on every single one of these, we have something that's going on in the header bar as an admin user, to where we can see what's the consumption level, as far as, do we see errors that are occurring? Do we see long running things? Like, for example, 6.7 seconds, that's a problem to me. So I'm going to call out and say, okay, what is this issue? And that allows me to go chase that down. But for a less technical user, other things that we can also leverage are systems where we can go and impersonate a user as if they were impersonate a user as if we can then see the way that they're using the application. So for example, if we go into the locksmith agency, and I think this one's going to take a while to load as well, and we can go down into our user base here, again, as WordPressy as possible, and we're just going to use S. Wilson just because I know that this user exists, because this is one of my testing users at the moment. And we can go, and we're using a user impersonate plugin, and we can do a switch to. So what this now does is this allows me to then impersonate this user within their application. And if you noticed, when I originally logged in, I had a dashboard that was not customized to me. In this particular case, I can now see what the dashboard is that is customized to this specific user, and I can see, oh, we're giving them their offers. They haven't completely finished out their profile. We want to promote and market to them and things like that. And so this now allows me to see, what would my user see if they were to log in. I know in other systems that in the past that I've worked in, you have to know the user's name and password. And from a security standpoint, the less you can, or the more you can protect yourself, but the less you know about your user as far as what their private credentials are, allows you to use things like the single sign-on or OAuth through social media profiles or shared account profiles. And then using impersonate user allows you to kind of isolate that security at one layer through a point and click interface. Again, very no to low code solution, and then be able to impersonate so that you can see how that user is performing or what they're doing. And those kinds of things are, I'm just going to make it very simple, super easy and barely an inconvenience to just configure at that point. And so in this case, like for example, we have this user that's logged in, and we have service requests, and we want them to then see what their service requests are. And if they call in and they say, hey, well, I can't see any service requests, we can go and look at what they're seeing and be like, oh, this makes a lot more sense. You need to actually have a locksmith profile. You need to actually, as an individual user, be tied to a corporate organization in order for you to see those service requests from that corporate organization. And so we have ways to then be more intelligent about the support that we're giving. And for those of you that have used the user switch or have not, it will always give you the option of switching back to your specific user. So once you're done impersonating and you're going, oh, I see exactly the challenge that you're having, then we're going to go and we're going to switch back. It's going to reset your current active session within your browser, and it brings you back to your own specific user, and you can go address them, whether it's through a support ticket that you've implemented or through some sort of live chat that you may have running. Along those lines, get my bearings back here on the Synnex pricing trends, we have a sample report. And this is an example of some of the reporting that we're doing where we have collected data over the past, I think we have about 7 or 8 years of data that we've collected every month of what the average prices are for Windows. And what we can see is we can trace this stuff. And in this particular case, we're using a plugin for charting and visualization. And again, a lot of this can all be very simply built. In this data, we're pulling against a MongoDB from a separate instance. And in order to provide that data, we want to also filter it. And so we have a remote API that we hit to pull that information in. And when we pull that information in, we can then also qualify that query or that initial request with additional faceted features. So what we've done here is we've actually set up a gravity form, and inside of that gravity form, we've defined what we want as those faceted features to then build out the properties or the individual facets of those filters. And that then goes to our Mongo database behind the scenes. So as we go and we set them, we can also do qualifications of additional filters or attributes around those product entries within the database. And just to kind of also give some interesting index, there's a public API that we're hitting from the Federal Reserve in the US for window and door manufacturing over the last however many years, about 4 years it looks like. And we're pulling this in through a graph visualization. So for example, we're going to go edit page. And we're going to pull up the Kadence interface with our block editing. And our client wanted a way to manually kind of build out a more formulated forecast and address that. But in some cases, we're using like this visualizer with an ID. And then we've got some charts down here where we're also using a visualizer. We've built our own custom, for this particular project, we built our own custom short code. We're looking to actually enhance this to make it just a block so it shows in the console here so that we can enable the user, our client user, to administrate this feature a little easier through the editing interface and allow them to reposition that report as they see fit. So in your case, switching back to our core requirements, our customers are looking to use data to ingest it, whether it be from lead generation for the locksmiths, whether it be for financial services requests, whether even with our Arena client, even in the case of like with their bookkeeping and CPA pieces, they will have quarterly or even monthly reports that have to go out. In order to generate those reports through our backend systems, they need to intake or ingest that data. And so by using our integrations with QuickBooks, using our integrations with the Fed Reserve, using integrations with MongoDB and other data sources, we can pull that data in, run it through either internal algorithms that we've built, and I'll show you kind of some of that code samples, or we can leverage additional other third parties and just pull that data in and display it through a visualized chart, whether it be a line graph, an area chart, scatter charts, or even pie charts. We also have data architecture in mind on each of these pieces. So that way, if for whatever reason our customer decides, hey, we want to take this to the next level, or we don't like really working with you any longer, or we want to sell the company. I've had several clients where their SaaS has taken off and they've gotten PE firms invested and involved in it. And the PE firms are like, hey, this is awesome. And we want to keep doing this, but we actually want to expand it. We want to bring in these other pieces. And we're like, cool, you can bring them in us or you can export it. And so being able to add ways to open up the APIs within WordPress, and this talk is not long enough to really go down the REST API route, but there are tons of awesome resources on how to improve your outbound APIs through REST API or GraphQL to provide that data through an authenticated way out to either integrated partners that you're working with through a PE firm or integrated partners of sibling apps and things like that. For example, in the case of the Arena site, we're using a authenticated REST API between Arena CFO and the app.Arena CFO in order to drive our data that's being input between those two systems and synchronize them. We have things that we've been working on that under a WordPress Nexus concept, and basically trying to set up kind of a similar, little bit more easy point and click interface to tie or authenticate sites, other WordPress sites together, to be able to allow users, site administrator users, to stand up multiple different WordPress sites to run independently, but then share their resources, whether it be content as like a blog post, and be able to do shared blog posts across multiple sites, or in the case of like a directory where, for example, with the locksmith agency, every single one of the locksmiths that are then enabled or entitled within the locksmith agency, they will also show up on an additional site, and I'll actually bring that up in real time. They'll show up on an additional site called 1-800-UNLOCKS. And so this site here is more consumer facing. So we have a site in this case that's my clients' customers facing, and they have a sibling site that is their clients' customer facing. And so in this case here, if you're locked out of your house or locked out of your car, you can call a 1-800 number that leverages Twilio to then integrate into this application and find someone based on your geographic location, based on your cell phone. We have systems where the locksmiths will then get inbound leads through this, and they automatically tie in through here. And so I know I keep talking about these high level like integrations, but what we're really looking at is the data architecture between these systems, because the foundation is all WordPress, and we're using similar plugins or similar structures of our data through post types and meta fields. That way, when the API talks to each other, that we can share that data and then leverage it in different ways for our customer base. Going into our monitoring and scaling area, I was talking earlier about the Query Monitor. So we can look at the performance of each site through Query Monitor. We also have things within our hosting platforms. We use actually a host of several different hosts, or not a host of several different hosts, but we use several different hosts that are well supported, both from a managed hosting standpoint, but even we run some unmanaged, fully customized, built out stuff within Google Cloud Platform and AWS for like S3 integrations or edge functions and things like that. When we leverage those, we have some plugins that we have built internally. We're not at a point to necessarily share them out yet because they're still a bit rough around the edges. But that allows us to not only see what the performance is within the WordPress instance as far as all the data and the tags that are useful as a developer, but it also lets us see what the resource consumption is even within our instances or through a multi-tenant loadout. We also look at things like, for example, inside of our user management, we're going to go into subscriptions here. So we can go and we can see the subscriptions that are set up. And then tied to that, if we go into, for example, Gravity Stripe, we can go in and we can see, as a user manager or an admin of this site, we can go in and see, similar to how like WooCommerce works from a product and orders standpoint, we have that same kind of behavior with Stripe subscriptions. We run, in this particular case, we run Gravity Stripe on, I'm trying to think, I think it's this site here. We have another subscription model that is a homegrown, similar type of subscription, where we drive that kind of pricing against our customer, and we're using a combination of post types and additional built-out logic to where we can create those subscriptions without all the overhead that WooCommerce adds. Whereas in the case of the locksmith agency, we'll take a second to load this up. This site uses WooCommerce from a WooCommerce subscriptions. So what we've done is we've based on our customers' needs, we have structured and formatted out more specific around the different types of usefulness for our customers to then be able to leverage what our clients need as far as user management. In the case of like Cynics, it's really just a simple subscription. In the case of the locksmiths company, it is more about looking at selling products like physical items like locks and the distribution, drop shipping capabilities, as well as subscriptions. In the case of Arena, that is a we built a subscription system out that used an offline payment mechanism and processing because of the way that the relationships are configured slightly different. So with that, you should now all understand. And we're going to say, show me the money. So we're getting towards the end here, which is more looking at what does this cost the user? And the reality is that you could build a lot of this with Kadence, even with the free stuff. You can even go with just the Kadence theme and plugins and the awesome form builder that's inside of there. You can do some really cool stuff. Where Gravity Forms tends to shine, from my opinion, out of all of the other form builders out there, is Gravity Forms has a ton of developer hooks to allow you to pre-process, post-process, and just process data in and out of their system. And so from that, when you combine Gravity Forms and ACF or any other system that does a good job of managing the data attributes around your post types and your fields, then you have a really killer solution with those kind of three combined together. And then if you start adding things like WP data tables or user role editing, you can start creating user roles that are specific to different customer levels. So for example, in the case of like the Cynics client, we have a admin role, which would be more of a technical role. Then we have a business admin role, and that's more of a role that's going to do subscription management and user management, slight data management kind of things. And then we have a organizational manager role, and that's someone that works at one of these manufacturing companies that is more of a client's client relationship. And then you may have individual forecasting roles where people who are subscribed are then able to manage their own subscriptions, see the data, integrate with the data, format with the data, play with it, and create their own custom reports, but not be able to change it as in impact the way the data imports work or impact the way the relationship that organization has with the SaaS itself. There's some other awesome ones for ACF and for Gravity Forms as well, just really depending on what your feature set is. So if you're looking to build out subscription management, if you're looking to build out a directory, there's some great pieces out there. One of the cool things that we leverage, and actually I haven't shown it yet, so let me go show that right now, is if we look at how to manage a specific like organizational account. So again, we've set these up as pages. So if we go in here and we look at this as if it were a customer of ours, we have the ability to manage users within this layout. And then we can also go and we can manage like our contact information. And I was mentioning earlier the pop-up field. So what we've done is we use Kadence to create the shell of this layout. And then we use Gravity Forms to drive this information, and then using Gravity Wiz with the pre-populate field ability, we can leverage the custom ID that we have for the locksmith, do a lookup, pre-populate these business fields for Gravity Forms, and then on the back end, when we go and we look at like what our users are doing, and let me actually bring that up here. We have the ability to see like and make empirical decisions and direction based on what the users are actually doing. So if we're like, hey, you know what, users really need to be able to manage their contact information, we can actually go into the back end and say, okay, how often do users actually do that? And so, for example, if we go into logs, and this is a extension that we've made within our Gravity Forms interface that will create a log for any action that then ends up being performed when a Gravity Form is submitted. And so in case, like if we want to see, this is a contact detail. So actually, I'm just going to be lazy and just click on like add note. If we want to see here, what we can do is we can see that there was an API. In this case, the 360 is one of our subsidiaries, one of the 180 integration points. We had a 360 input that created a note that's submitted through a Gravity Form, and it's tied to our log. It's tied to a specific service request, and then we have the data that is being passed in. So we get a raw message that comes through, and we can interpret and inspect and ultimately go and say, okay, out of, let's just say the 360 system, how many times is our system being called? And we recently had a conversation with one of our dispatch companies where originally the contract was that they would send us several thousand leads a month. And when we went and looked in the logs, we were like, you're sending us about 150 leads a month. That is a shortfall on what we were expecting, but yet we're paying for this large lead volume. And so that gave us empirical data to look at how the leads were coming in, whether they were qualified and successful or not, and then be able to renegotiate a contract with our third-party partner. In this particular case, we can also look at our Gravity Forms entries and see, okay, are people changing services? Are they adding additional services? We can see what services they're adding and say, okay, maybe we need to be more specific, or maybe folks are not really using a lot of like in this case here, the specific locksmith is only focused on automotive locks. They don't do residential or commercial kind of work. And so then the question becomes, do we have a particular type of user? Like, is our system shifting more into automotive services rather than into commercial or residential services? And it allows the business owners to then make decisions and go, how do we market this? Maybe we aren't marketing it the way we would expect, or maybe we're not seeing the kind of data that we would expect coming back from it. We also have ways, for example, in the case of the documents. In this particular case, I'll have to look service area. Yeah, so Connecticut. So fun aside is that people locksmiths in Connecticut do not have the same stringent licensing that other states do. And so in this case here, they happen to not have to be required to submit a lot of their insurance or state licensing because their state doesn't support it. If we had built this display out a little more effectively, and this is probably something that we'll open a ticket on to fix ourselves, but if we had built this display out a little bit more effectively, we would put in conditional shows on these blocks to whether we would show or not show those specific fields. So for example, and how we could fix this is, let's
after you show that, we got one question. We're getting low on time, so I just wanted to make sure we had time for that.
Yeah, go ahead and ask the question while I dig this up, and we'll go from there.
Well, Matt just wants to know how the actual Gravity Forms works with Kadence to build the apps. Is there like, can you lift the hood for that?
I can, yeah. So yes, I can. And let's actually do locksmith authenticated details. One of the things that we're leveraging is the Kadence elements, and then we go in and replace based on like if a user is logged in, if it's a full post, and things like that. And so what you'll see here is under documents, if we go and set the visibility, this is taking a minute to load. When this loads, we should be looking for is whether a value exists or not for that field, and then we can change it. And so in here, what we can do is we can say, for example, in advanced custom fields, we want to show this block if licensed in state, and we'll set a condition, has any value and it's associated to the current post. And so I'm not going to make this change given it's in production, but what this will do is this allows us to do conditional display based on if a value is present or not. And it can give us a better user experience so that our users aren't seeing this like state license expires kind of thing. So
can you go back one screen? How did you get the little visibility thing to pop up over there?
Yes, so that is a specific plugin. So let's go to the end here. There's a plugin called Block Visibility WP.
Okay.
I believe it's free. It used to be a paid plugin, and they opened it up free to the world fairly recently. I believe that one's free. There's actually 2 or 3 different visibility or block level kind of conditional plugins, but this one is the one that we typically use the most because it has a ton of other options. You can do things like if the page URL is a certain match, if the user is a certain role, if they're logged in, not logged in, if other, like you can do conditionals on the same page. If other blocks are shown, hide this block. one of the other cool pieces is there's lots of integrations with other third-party plugins such as ACF or WooCommerce and others, to where you can then create values and say if it has a particular value, so if the value contains or is equal to like hello world, you can have it drive off of that. You can also have blocks show or hide based on a particular user or a particular user role, and things like that. You can also do counter specific values or conditions where you would say if it actually matches this, don't show that block. And we do a lot of that, like on the Cynics, where for subscriptions we'll give you call outs that will say you should subscribe to this new feature if you aren't subscribed. So if you have a subscription for Windows, then we hide the you should subscribe to Windows meta blocks on the display. All right, so let's log into, and one thing I also wanted to jump into, but I'm just going to save it to the end. But let's log in or jump into kind of WordPress Gravity forms and the way that those are tied in. So in the case, and we'll actually use this as an example. So let's say contact, this contact details. We're going to use contact. So manage contact. So we have a locksmith managed contact entry. And you will see here is our business phone and email and SMS number. And so again, very similar, familiar interface. We click and we edit that specific field. We're using the Gravity Wiz populate field. And we're saying based on the type, as long as the current post ID, so the current post ID here, and because of the way we do some of our lookups, we have a interceptor that will use either the current ID or this custom slug ID that we leverage. But for all intents and purposes, current post ID. And then we say, give us this field value back. And so when you load this form on a locksmith page, then it will load that locksmith phone number inside of here. And then when you go and submit it, so under entries, when you go submit that specific form, you can see all of the submissions. So in this case, we haven't had a lot of interactions, but we can go in and we can look at a specific entry. So if a customer calls in and says, hey, my phone number didn't update, we can go actually look at the latest entry for that specific locksmith and be like, you put the wrong email address in, or you took the phone number out and that's a required field, those kinds of things. That also allows us to then set up notifications and confirmations on all of the forms that are on the site to be specific to the data that the user is interfacing with. So a lot of SaaS applications will have custom forms where you're taking data and then you're kind of appending or creating a larger object from that, because you're doing some sort of reporting or manipulation to it. And Gravity Forms gives you a great way to start with that. And then once that data has been updated, let's actually go into, like in this case here, we have like a Slack notification, we have some post-creation kind of stuff, some user registrations, not for this specific form, but for some of our forms. So when the locksmith stuff is managed or updated, our Slack channel gets updated and says, hey, the locksmith updated their security documents or their licensing. And that prompts our support team to go validate and be like, oh, we should actually reach out because the image wasn't clear enough or something along those lines. I think I answered kind of that question, but we can dig in a little deeper if we want.
Yeah, we've got about 2-ish minutes left. I think that was the main question that we just wanted to address. I think that we covered that pretty well. But if you have any last minute little tips, or if you want to share how people can also take the next step with you as well, that'd be great too. Definitely.
So let's switch back to here. This is how you can find me anywhere online as Code Arachnid. It was a young and dumb choice many years ago to try to be goofy with my school mascot. But it kind of stuck, and that's where I'm at. If it's easier, you can also find me at tim@alwayscurious.co. And then finally on the last slide, and I believe the slides will be pushed out on the last slide, there's a link to just about every single plugin that we're using in some variation on these slides. But I've also created a Kadence Amplify 2024 GitHub repo. Again, under Code Arachnid, you can find me. It has my presentation that we just walked through, so duplicate links, but I've included a couple of snippets that you can run within whatever code program you want to use to do a couple different things, such as bypassing the Gravity Forms custom login to then create your own custom login with forgot password functionality, reset password functionality, log in without or log out without confirmation confirming, and also log in without having to confirm. And then the last fun tidbit, I don't know if I have it on here. Don't see it on here, but I will update this slide and get it updated. There is a new plugin that I created. It was featured on the Gravity Forms Twitter channel, and there's been some podcasts about it, but it's called Magic Link. So if you just Google Gravity Forms Magic Link, it's really stupid simple. It's only a few lines of code, but what it does, and let's actually log out of here and I can show you how this works. If I go to login and I go to this magic link and I put my email address in here and then I hit send magic link, this is a custom Gravity Forms that I've set up. And what it's doing is it's going to send a link to my email. And when I take that link, and we're going to pretend it worked, but when I take that link and I click that link, it will then automatically log me into my dashboard as if I were that user. So the advantage of that is that it allows users a much more seamless way to interface with your application without passwords. There's also a ton of other awesome Magic Link plugins out there. This one just happens to use Gravity Forms, and I will show you the final piece of that, which is you create this cool little link. You then are able to manage your notification to your customer, right? So you can do all of your custom branding or whatever you want to do. In this case here, it's really super simple. You put a merge tag of Magic Link in place and it'll punch it out to your customer. It also then allows you to see how many people are actually using that Magic Link. And so the link that I just sent, you can see on here, it's sent to the email. We get a confirmation. And so we end up seeing, what we end up seeing is we see the behavior that this user is doing. So we can then run reports as exports out of Gravity Forms to say, okay, Magic Link is being used 86% of the time in comparison to login form or any other variation.
That is really, really cool. Well, thank you again so much for this really in-depth talk. I really enjoyed it. And I hope that our users also got a good look at ways that they can really customize WordPress in very unique ways. And just having this slide up just so that everyone knows, because I know you said at the beginning, you may not be able to cover everything. So if there are questions, people can reach out to you, right?
Yep, most definitely.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate it.